The name on the reservation. Richard Whitmore almost canceled the dinner when he saw the name Samuel Carter. Not because he disliked the man, because he remembered loving him once. The name sat on the confirmation screen in the same neat black font as every other name the service had sent him over the past 8 months. Usually, Richard barely looked. He cared about the time, the restaurant, the dress code, and whether the person had been told not to arrive late. The names themselves meant nothing. They belonged to women with careful smiles, widowers who had learned to talk too much, retired teachers, one former nurse, a man who had described his grandchildren for nearly 40 minutes. Richard paid. They ate, they talked. He tipped well through the agency, thanked them, and never requested the same companion twice. That was the point of the arrangement. No history, no obligation, no one expecting a second call. But Samuel Carter was not supposed to be on that list. Richard stood in the front hall of his house in Fox Chapel with his coat folded over one arm and the phone still lit in his hand. The house behind him was warm, quiet, and too orderly. A pair of Italian leather shoes waited beside the entry bench. His keys were in the blue ceramic bowl near the door. The cleaning woman had left the faint smell of lemon polish on the banister. Everything had been put where it belonged. At 67, Richard had built a life in which very little surprised him. He had retired 3 years earlier after selling the construction supply company. He had grown from a narrow warehouse on the south side into 3 regional offices and a name people in Pittsburgh still recognized. He owned the house outright. He had no debts, no schedule he did not choose, and no one in the house to ask why he was leaving before 6. His son Michael lived 40 minutes away. That was not far, Richard often told himself. Distance was not the problem. People got busy. Men had their own families, their own routines, their own ways of doing things. Michael answered texts most of the time. He sent birthday cards. He called on Christmas morning, usually before noon. It was not nothing. Richard looked down at the confirmation again. Samuel Carter. Altius, 7 p.m. For a moment, his thumb hovered over the agency number. He could cancel. Say he felt unwell. Say there had been a family emergency, though the phrase irritated him as soon as it crossed his mind. Family emergency implied there was family close enough to be interrupted. He locked the phone instead. Canceling would make it look as if he were afraid to face Sam Carter, and Richard had never liked giving another man that kind of advantage, even in a situation where the other man did not know there was anything to win. He put on his coat. The drive across the city took longer than it needed to. Traffic thickened near the river, brake lights gathering in red lines ahead of him. Richard kept one hand high on the wheel, the other resting against the console, and told himself there were dozens of Samuel Carters in Pennsylvania. It was a common enough name. Maybe the agency had sent a man 30 years younger. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he had let an old memory make him foolish. By the time the valet opened his door, Richard had settled his face into the expression he used for business lunches with men who wanted something. Pleasant, unavailable, polite enough to end the conversation whenever he chose. Inside, the restaurant glowed with the kind of money that preferred not to announce itself too loudly. Low light, dark wood, a long bar with bottles arranged like a private collection. Richard gave his name to the hostess. She smiled as if she knew him, though he had only been there twice. "Your guest has just arrived," she said. Richard followed her through the dining room. The man at the table stood when he saw him. For one strange second, Richard saw the boy first. Not the thinning gray hair or the soft weight at the middle, not the brown sport coat that had been brushed carefully but had lost its shape at the elbows. He saw Sam Carter at 12 years old, all knees and quick grin, racing him down an alley behind St. Agnes with a stolen apple in each hand. He saw the gap between Sam's front teeth before braces. He saw scraped knuckles, muddy shoes, the two of them lying on their backs under the railroad bridge, swearing they would leave Pittsburgh before it made old men of them. Then the man across from him smiled, and the boy was gone. "Richie Whitmore," Sam said. No one had called him Richie in 40 years. Richard extended his hand because it was the safest thing to do. "Sam?" Sam shook it with both surprise and care, as if the handshake had weight beyond manners. "Well, I'll be damned." The hostess waited with her menus. Richard realized he had not sat down. He did so quickly, smoothing the front of his coat. "I didn't know," Sam said after the hostess left. Richard picked up his water glass. "Neither did I." That was true, at least. Sam glanced toward the empty space between them, where the restaurant had placed a small candle and 2 folded napkins. His eyes moved to Richard's suit, then away. He understood enough. Richard saw the moment land. There it was, the thing Richard had paid to keep tidy. The arrangement had rules, but old friends did not. I can ask them to reassign, Sam said quietly. Richard set down the glass. Don't be ridiculous. I wouldn't take it personal. I said it's fine. The words came sharper than he intended. Sam looked at him for a beat, then nodded. Fine, he said. Then I guess we're having dinner. The waiter came, grateful for the interruption. Richard ordered a bottle of red without asking Sam what he wanted, then corrected himself halfway through the sentence. Unless you'd rather have something else. Sam's mouth twitched. Red's fine. Richard hated that he could hear the old amusement in it. They began with safe things. Names of people who had died. A corner store that had become a pharmacy. The Catholic school that was now condos. Sam had worked at a warehouse, then maintenance for a hospital, then a driving service, before his back started bothering him. He said this without apology, though Richard could hear the carefulness around the edges. Richard gave the shortened version of his own life. Business, retirement, house outside the city. He left out the mornings when he walked through 6 rooms before speaking to anyone. You did well, Sam said. I worked. I didn't say you didn't. Richard cut into his steak. Everybody works. Not everybody ends up where you did. There was no accusation in it. That bothered Richard more than if there had been. For a while, the old rhythm almost returned. Sam told a story about Sister Marianne throwing an eraser that hit the wrong boy. Richard remembered the boy's name before Sam did. They laughed, not loudly, but enough that the waiter glanced over with relief, as though pleased the 2 older men were not going to sit through the meal in stiffness. Then Sam leaned back and wiped his mouth with the napkin. So, he said, you got family around here? Richard knew the question was ordinary. Men their age asked it because there were only so many bridges to cross after weather, work, and dead acquaintances. Still, something in him tightened. My son's here, Richard said. Yeah, what's his name? Michael. Sam nodded. He got kids? No, it came out too quickly. Sam did not seem to notice, or pretended not to. What does he do? Project management? Commercial development. Richard heard the pride in his own voice and allowed it. He's done well. Good head on his shoulders. That's good. He owns his place, doesn't need anything from me. Richard took a sip of wine. I made sure of that. Sam looked down at his plate, then back up. You see him much? The question should not have felt like a hand placed on a bruise. Richard smiled a little. You know how it is. People are busy. Sam waited. The waiting was worse than a question. He has his own life, Richard said. I'm not the kind of father who expects a grown man to report in every week. No, Sam said. Didn't figure you were. Richard could not tell whether that was agreement or memory. He calls, Richard added. Good. On holidays, birthdays, if something comes up? Sam nodded again. There was nothing wrong with the nod. It did not judge. It did not pity. It simply left the space open, and Richard found himself stepping into it because silence had always annoyed him when it made him feel cornered. I gave that boy every advantage I never had, he said. Good schools, a car when he needed one, help with the down payment. I never let him wonder where the next month's money was coming from. Sam folded his hands near the edge of the table. They were rougher than Richard remembered, the nails clean but worn. That's no small thing, Sam said. No, it isn't. Richard heard the defensiveness and disliked Sam for making him hear it. He was a difficult kid, he said, though Michael had not been difficult in any way Richard could explain without sounding unreasonable. Quiet, stubborn, always had his own ideas. Sam's eyes flickered with something like recognition. A lot of boys do. This was different. How? Richard cut another piece of steak, smaller this time. He did not eat it. He thought wanting something made it practical, Richard said. That's the problem with kids. They think because they care about a thing, the world owes them room for it. Sam did not answer right away. Around them, the restaurant continued as if nothing had shifted. Forks touched plates. A woman at the next table laughed softly. The waiter poured wine for a couple by the window. Richard could see his own reflection in the glass beyond Sam's shoulder. Silver hair, good suit, straight back. A man who looked as if he had never had to explain himself to anyone. Sam picked up his glass but did not drink. What did he want? He asked. Richard looked at him. Michael, Sam said. What did he want? The question was simple. Too simple. Richard felt the old irritation rise, familiar and almost welcome. It gave him somewhere to stand. He wanted a lot of things, he said. At 17, everybody does. Sam's face stayed open. Richard set his fork down. I pushed him because somebody had to, he said. His mother was softer about those things. I was the one who had to think past the next 5 minutes. A boy needs that. He needs someone willing to be unpopular. Sure, Sam said carefully. Richard leaned back. You think I enjoyed being hard on him? No, I didn't. But I wasn't raising him to like me. I was raising him to survive. The sentence landed with the force Richard intended. It had served him well for years, that sentence. It closed doors, it ended arguments, it made people step back from whatever soft accusation they thought they were making. Sam did not step back. He looked at Richard for a long moment. Not coldly, not even sadly. Just steadily, as if trying to find the boy under the man Richard had become, and not quite succeeding. Then he said, "And did he?" Richard's hand closed around the stem of his wine glass. Did he what? Survive. The word should have been easy to answer. Michael had a career, a house, health insurance, a retirement account, probably better managed than Richard's had been at that age. He sent thank you texts. He remembered Father's Day. He had survived by every measure Richard had taught him to respect. Yes, Richard said. Sam nodded, but he did not look convinced. Richard turned his attention back to the steak, though it had cooled. He cut the small piece he had already cut into something smaller, then stopped when he realized what he was doing. I gave him everything, he said. This time Sam did not nod. He only sat there across the table in the restaurant Richard had chosen because it was expensive enough to make distance feel natural. And for the first time that evening, Richard wished the man across from him had been a stranger. Every advantage. Richard had told Sam he gave Michael every advantage he never had. For years, that sentence had held up well. It sounded clean, it sounded practical. It sounded like a father who had done his job and refused to apologize for it. But the first time Michael showed him what he truly wanted, Richard did not see a son asking to be understood. He saw a risk. Michael was 17 then, tall already, but still narrow in the shoulders, with hair that fell into his eyes no matter how often Richard told him to get it cut. He had waited at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, though he pretended he had not been waiting. A school binder sat open in front of him. Beside it lay 3 sheets of heavy paper covered in pencil lines. Building fronts, a small courtyard, benches, windows, a narrow walkway shaded by trees. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional tick of the old wall clock near the pantry. His mother had gone upstairs with a headache. Dinner had been put away, the foil pulled tight over a plate for Richard. Michael had not eaten much. He had pushed peas around with his fork until his mother asked if he was sick, and he had said no too quickly. Now he sat with one knee bouncing under the table, stopping it every time he noticed. When the garage door finally rumbled open, Michael straightened. He pulled the papers closer, then pushed them away again, as if the distance between his hands and the drawings could make him look less eager. Richard came in through the mudroom with his tie loosened and his coat over one arm. His face had the gray, set look he wore after long days at the office, the look that warned the house to keep its needs small. He dropped his keys into the dish by the back door and glanced toward the counter. "Your mother eat?" "Yeah," Michael said. "She saved you a plate." Richard opened the refrigerator, saw the covered dinner, and shut it without taking anything out. Later, Michael watched him wash his hands at the sink. Richard scrubbed under his nails as if he were still removing the day from himself. There had been trouble at work that week. Michael knew pieces of it, because Richard took certain calls in the house and forgot how loud his voice carried. A supplier had missed a delivery. A contractor had threatened to walk. Someone owed money. Someone always owed money. Michael waited until Richard dried his hands. "Dad?" Richard did not turn right away. "What?" "I wanted to show you something." That made Richard look over. Michael felt the attention like heat. For a second, he regretted everything. The waiting, the papers, the careful speech he had practiced twice in his room. He almost said, "Never mind." He almost slid the drawings back into the binder and went upstairs. But his father was looking at him, and some young, stubborn part of Michael still believed there was a version of this evening where Richard would sit down, study the lines, and see him. "It's for school," Michael said, and it started that way. Richard glanced at the wall clock. "What class?" "Design tech, but Mrs. Alvarez said it's stronger than the assignment." Michael swallowed. "She said I should think about submitting it for the county student showcase." Richard came closer, but he did not sit. He stood at the edge of the table and looked down at the drawings. "What is it?" "A community center." Michael moved one sheet forward with 2 fingers. "For that empty lot near the old library. I know it's not real, but the assignment was to design something useful. So I thought, there are a lot of kids who hang around there after school. And older people, too. It could have classrooms, maybe a small job board, a place for meetings." Richard leaned over the paper. His eyes moved across the sketch, but Michael could not tell if he was seeing it. "You drew this?" "Yeah." "All of it?" "Yeah." Richard picked up one page. He held it by the corner, careful not to smudge the pencil, and for one brief second, Michael allowed himself to feel the pleasure of that care. "It's neat," Richard said. The word was small, but Michael took it anyway. Thanks. Richard set the page down. What's the showcase? Students from different schools submit projects. Some local firms sponsor prizes. Mrs. Alvarez said a guy from Carnegie Mellon might be there. Not like admissions or anything, but Michael heard himself rushing and forced his voice lower. She said I should start building a portfolio. Richard's hand stopped on the back of the chair. A portfolio. For architecture or urban planning, something like that. The kitchen changed then. Not loudly, nothing moved. The refrigerator still hummed. The clock still ticked. The plate in the fridge waited under foil. But Michael felt the narrow opening he had made begin to close. Richard pulled the chair out and sat down. When did architecture come into this? Michael tried to smile, and it's been there. That's not an answer. I've been thinking about it for a while. How long is a while? I don't know, since last year, maybe? Last year. Richard said it as if Michael had been hiding something dangerous in the walls. I wasn't sure, Michael said. I wanted to get better before I said anything. You wanted to get better at drawing buildings, at designing them. Richard leaned back. And what happened to business school? Michael looked at the papers. That was your idea. It was a good idea. I know. No, I don't think you do. Michael's knees started bouncing again. This time he let it. Richard rubbed one hand over his face, then dropped it to the table. Do you have any idea what architects make when they start out? It's not just about... It is always about money until you have enough of it. That's the first thing people like to forget. Michael did not answer. Richard took the silence as room to continue. He had always done that. Silence to Richard was not refusal. It was permission. You think because a teacher complimented a drawing, that's a plan? She didn't just compliment it. Oh, she changed your life? Michael's face warmed. Don't do that. Richard's eyes lifted. What? Make it sound stupid. I'm asking questions. No, you're not. The words came out before Michael could soften them. Richard sat very still. For most of Michael's childhood, the rules had been simple. Do well. Be respectful. Do not talk back. Do not make your mother worry. Do not embarrass your father in public or private. If Richard raised his voice, Michael lowered his. If Richard said enough, Michael stopped. Peace in the house usually depended on Michael knowing when to disappear. But the drawings were still on the table. They looked exposed there, almost foolish now, but they were his. Richard's voice dropped. Watch your tone. Michael pressed his palm flat against one of the pages. I'm not trying to fight. Could have fooled me. I'm trying to tell you what I want. What you want? Richard gave a short laugh with no humor in it. You're 17. I know how old I am. You know nothing about what the world does to people who don't have a plan. This is a plan. No, this is a picture. Michael flinched before he could stop himself. Richard saw it and kept going, because he believed hesitation meant the point had landed. You want to sit around making pretty drawings while other people figure out how to pay for things? You think the world needs another kid with big ideas and no backbone? Michael gathered the pages, but Richard put his hand on one before he could take it. Leave it. It's mine. I said leave it. Michael's fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. His voice was quieter when he spoke, and because it was quieter, it sounded older. I don't want to work for your company. Richard stared at him. That was the thing then. Not architecture, not the drawings, not Mrs. Alvarez or the showcase or the empty lot near the old library. That sentence. Richard felt something hard move through his chest. He had not asked Michael to come into the company the next morning. He had not drawn up papers. He had not said the boy had no choice. But everyone knew what made sense. Everyone knew what Richard had built. Everyone knew the kind of opportunity a son would be a fool to throw away. You don't know what you want, Richard said. I know I don't want that. That. Michael swallowed. I didn't mean... No, go ahead. Say it. Say exactly what you mean. Michael looked toward the staircase, as if his mother might appear, then back at his father. I don't want to spend my life selling materials for buildings other people get to imagine. Richard stood so fast the chair legs scraped the floor. You think that's what I do? No, You think I spent 25 years breaking my back so you could stand in my kitchen and look down on it? I'm not looking down on it. You just did. Michael's face had gone pale, but he did not retreat this time. That should have warned Richard. A boy who usually folded himself small had stayed in the chair with his hand on the drawing. I'm saying it's not mine, Michael said. Richard picked up the top sheet. For a second, he meant only to move it aside. Later, he would tell himself that. He would remember his own hand reaching, the paper lifting, Michael's eyes following it. He would remember the cheap pencil lines, the careful windows, the courtyard drawn with more patience than Richard had ever given anything that did not promise a return. Then he heard Michael say, Dad, don't. Not loudly, not rudely, just afraid. Something in Richard burned at that fear. It made him feel accused. He tore the page once down the middle. Michael made a sound that was not quite a word. Richard tore it again. "Here's your first lesson," he said. "The world doesn't care how much you love an idea." Michael stood. "Stop." Richard reached for another sheet. Michael grabbed his wrist. It was not a hard grab, not violent, just a desperate hand around a father's arm. But Richard felt the contact as defiance. He slapped Michael before he thought about it. The sound was small in the kitchen. Smaller than it should have been. It did not echo. It did not become the kind of sound that would wake the whole house or bring someone running. It was just skin against skin, and then Michael's head turned slightly to the side, and one torn half of the drawing slid off the table onto the floor. Richard's hand stayed in the air a second too long. Michael looked back at him. There were no tears. That was the first thing Richard noticed. No shouting either. No dramatic accusation. The boy's cheek had gone red, but his eyes had changed faster than his skin. Something had gone out of them. Not love, exactly. Richard would not have known how to name it then. Expectation, maybe. Michael let go of Richard's wrist. Richard lowered his hand. "Don't ever put your hands on me like that," he said. It was a terrible sentence. Even as he said it, some part of him knew he had chosen the wrong crime. Michael bent down and picked up the torn paper. He did it carefully, matching the pieces without looking at his father. His hands were steady. That made Richard angrier than trembling would have. "You hear me?" Richard said. "Yeah." The word was flat. Michael gathered the rest of the drawings, even the ruined ones, and slid them into the binder. One piece would not fit because of the tear, so he folded it once. Richard watched the crease go through the middle of a doorway Michael had shaded by hand. "You're not submitting anything until we talk about this properly," Richard said. Michael closed the binder. "Okay, I mean it." I said okay. Richard waited for more. An argument, an apology. Some sign that the order of the house could be restored if he pressed hard enough. Michael tucked the binder under his arm and pushed in the chair. The scrape of wood on tile was careful, almost polite. "I'm going upstairs," he said. "Michael." He stopped near the doorway but did not turn around. Richard had a chance then. A small one. He could see the red mark on his son's cheek. He could see the torn paper sticking out of the binder. He could say something that did not try to win. Instead, he said, "Well, we'll talk when you're ready to be reasonable." Michael nodded once. Not in agreement. In conclusion, he went upstairs without another word. A few seconds later, Richard heard his bedroom door close. Not slam. Close. That was worse. Richard stood in the kitchen with his dinner still in the refrigerator, and the chair still angled away from the table. On the floor, near his shoe, a small triangle of drawing paper had been left behind. It showed part of a bench, the corner of a tree, and 3 pencil lines that led nowhere without the rest of the page. He picked it up, meaning to throw it away. For some reason, he put it on the counter instead. The next morning, Michael came down for breakfast on time. His cheek had faded. He wore a clean shirt. He told his mother he had finished his homework. When Richard asked about school, Michael said it was fine. When Richard mentioned business programs 2 weeks later, Michael said he would think about it. He became easier after that. Quieter, too. At the time, Richard mistook the quiet for maturity. He told himself the boy had learned something useful. He told himself hard lessons stayed because they hurt a little going in. He told himself Michael would thank him one day, or if not thank him, at least understand. Michael did not submit the project to the showcase. Years later, when Richard looked back, that detail would bother him more than he expected. Not because of the showcase itself. The prize had probably been small. The room was probably full of folding tables and parents pretending not to be bored. It bothered him because Michael never mentioned it again. Not the drawings, not architecture, not the empty lot near the old library. He simply stopped bringing Richard things that mattered. An old friend at the table. Sam did not argue with Richard, and that made the table harder to sit at. Richard had been prepared for disagreement. He knew how to handle that. Disagreement had edges. It gave a man something to push against. He could clarify, correct, remind, explain. He could put facts in order until the other person either understood or tired of misunderstanding. But Sam only sat across from him with both hands around his water glass, listening as if Richard had not finished yet. The restaurant had thinned a little since they first sat down. The couple by the window had left. A busboy reset their table with quick, practiced movements. Behind Sam, the lights from Mount Washington pricked the dark glass, small and expensive looking from this side of the river. Richard had chosen this place because it made awkwardness behave. Good service did that. White tablecloths did that. A bottle of wine at the right price could soften almost anything. Sam Carter did not soften. "I don't mean he was a bad kid," Richard said. Sam nodded once. "I didn't think you meant that." He wasn't. He was smart. Still is. Richard moved his knife a half inch to the right, aligning it with the edge of the plate. Too smart, sometimes. Had ideas about things before he understood what they cost. What kind of things? Richard gave a short breath that was almost a laugh. You ask a lot of questions for somebody being paid to keep me company. Sam's face changed, but not much, just enough. Richard regretted it as soon as the words were out. Not because they were untrue. They were exactly true, which was worse. Sam looked down at his napkin, folded it once, then set it beside his plate. You're right, he said. Sam, No, you're right. He lifted his eyes again. I am being paid. The waiter appeared at the edge of the table with the dessert menus. Richard turned to him too sharply. Not yet. The young man withdrew. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Richard felt the shape of the check already, though it had not arrived. The agency would handle most of it. Tip included. Time slot recorded. Service completed. He could still make the evening return to what it was supposed to be if Sam would only let him. But Sam picked up his water glass, took a slow drink, and said, You always did know where the line was, even when you stepped on it. Richard looked at him. There was no heat in Sam's voice. That made it harder to dismiss. We were talking about Michael, Richard said. I know. Then ask what you wanted to ask. Sam glanced toward the window, where Richard's reflection sat faintly over the city lights. Does he come over for dinner? The question was gentle enough that Richard almost missed the blade in it. He's busy. Most people are. He works long hours. Sure, he lives across town. That's not far. Richard's jaw tightened. It can be with traffic. Sam nodded as if traffic were a serious answer. Richard picked up his wine and set it back down without drinking. He comes when he can. When was the last time? Richard did not like how quickly the date came to him. Late November, not Thanksgiving Day, the Saturday after. Michael had stopped by for coffee because he and his wife had already promised the holiday to her family. He had brought a bakery box. He had stayed 45 minutes, maybe 50. He had not taken off his coat. Recently enough, Richard said. Sam let the answer sit there. Richard felt irritation move up through him again, and with it something more useful than shame. You know, I'm not one of those old men sitting by the phone waiting for a child to remember him. I didn't say you were. No, but that's where this is going. I asked if he came to dinner. He has his own life. Of course. That's what you want for your kids, isn't it? Richard said. Independence, stability, not running back home every time something goes wrong. Sam's eyes lowered to the table, and for the first time that evening, Richard noticed the cuff of his shirt. Clean but frayed at the seam. Not careless. Worn. There was a difference, and Richard disliked noticing it. I guess that depends what they're running home to, Sam said. Richard leaned back. The words were not an accusation. Sam had not raised his voice. He had not put on the tone people use when they wanted credit for being honest. Still, the sentence reached Richard and stayed there. He looked toward the bar. You still live in the city? Carrick, Sam said. Same side as Linda's sister. Smaller place than we used to have, but it works. Linda, Richard repeated. You married her? 42 years. Richard almost smiled. She put up with you that long? She says the same thing. That loosened something. Not enough to make the table easy, but enough to let air back in. Linda Bowers, Richard said. She used to wear those white roller skates. Sam grinned and hit a trash can at Kennywood. You said it moved. It did move, sir. Spiritually. Richard laughed before he could stop himself. The sound surprised him. It came out rough, unused. Sam laughed too, not loudly. And for a second, the years between them thinned. Not disappeared. Just thinned enough for Richard to remember a time when neither of them had anything worth protecting except pride and a little trouble. Then Sam's smile settled. You should come by the house, he said. Richard looked up. What? My house, dinner, nothing fancy. Richard thought he had misheard. Why? Sam lifted one shoulder. Because people still eat dinner in houses, Rich. I didn't mean... I know what you meant. Richard reached for his water. The glass had left a ring on the tablecloth, faint but visible. I don't want to impose. You won't? Linda doesn't know me. She knows stories. That's worse. Some of them are good. Richard studied him. This part of the service? Sam's expression did not harden, but something in it became very still. No, he said, it isn't. Richard heard the correction. For the first time that evening, he was not sure whether paying gave him more control or less of it. Sam slid the dessert menu aside. Sunday. Nothing formal. Linda makes pot roast when the kids come by, and she always makes too much. The kids? Our daughter and her husband usually stop in. Sometimes my son if his shift lets out early. Grandkids if nobody has a game. Sam said it without display, just the practical inventory of a house, where people came and went because that was what they did. It's loud, fair warning. Richard thought of his own dining room table, polished every other week, used mostly when the cleaning woman moved the chairs to vacuum. I'm not sure, he said. That's fine. Sam did not try to sell it. He did not say it would be good for him. He did not mention Michael. He did not suggest old friends should not waste time, though men their age heard that sentence even when no one said it. He only took a pen from the inside pocket of his sport coat, tore a corner from the paper sleeve that had held his napkin, and wrote an address in small, square handwriting. Richard watched him write. The check came before Sam finished. Richard reached for it automatically. Sam set the paper corner on the table between them. No pressure, he said. Richard put his credit card in the folder. His name gleamed from the metal edge. He could leave the address there. He could pay, stand, shake Sam's hand, and let the service record another completed dinner. He could go home to the quiet house in Fox Chapel and decide, with perfect reason, that Sunday dinners in Carrick were not his kind of thing. Instead, he picked up the torn corner and folded it once. Sam noticed. He did not smile. That was decent of him. Richard slipped the address into the inside pocket of his suit coat, where it sat against his chest like a receipt for something he had not bought. I'll see, he said. Sam nodded. That's all I'm asking. Richard looked across the table at the man who had been paid to keep him company and had somehow, inconveniently, stopped doing only that. Outside the window, the city lights held steady. Inside, the table between them had changed. Not enough for Richard to name. Enough that he no longer knew how to end the evening cleanly. The house that had less. Richard almost drove past the house because it was smaller than he expected. Not small in the charming way some older houses were, with restored brick and expensive windows made to look original. Small in the ordinary way. Narrow porch, aluminum siding that had dulled at the corners. 2 cars in the driveway, neither new. A plastic basketball hoop leaned near the garage with the net hanging loose on one side. The front steps had been salted at some point and not fully swept. He slowed before the address Sam had written on the torn paper, then pulled to the curb instead of the driveway. For a moment, he sat with the engine running. It had been 4 days since the dinner at Altius. 4 days of the address sitting on his dresser, then in his coat pocket, then on the passenger seat beside him as if it were something with a deadline. He had nearly called twice to cancel. Once, he had even picked up the phone and searched Sam's number from the agency file, only to put the phone down when he imagined explaining why he could no longer come. There was no good reason. That was the problem. Richard turned off the engine. A curtain shifted in the front window. A second later, the door opened, and Sam stepped onto the porch in a sweater, with one sleeve pushed higher than the other. You found it, Sam called. Richard got out, smoothing the front of his coat. Your handwriting was legible enough. That's the nicest thing anyone said about it. Sam came down the steps before Richard reached them, not waiting to be approached like a host in a formal house. He took Richard's hand, then clapped him lightly on the shoulder. The gesture was quick, familiar, and too easy. Linda's inside, Sam said. Fair warning, she doesn't believe in letting people stand around politely. I'll try to survive. You say that now. Richard followed him up the steps. The porch boards gave a little under his shoes. Not dangerously, but enough for Richard to notice. He noticed the storm door sticking at the bottom when Sam pulled it open. He noticed a crack in one pane of the porch light, taped along the side. He noticed these things automatically, in the old measuring way he had used all his life. Repair cost, maintenance deferred, materials aging past their useful life. Then the smell from inside reached him. Roast beef, onions. Coffee already brewed too long. Something sweet cooling somewhere, maybe apples. The house was louder than he expected. Not shouting, not chaos, just sound. A television in another room turned low. A woman laughing from the kitchen. A drawer closing. A child's voice asking where the blue cup was, and another voice answering, check the dishwasher, buddy. Richard stepped inside and felt immediately overdressed. Richie Whitmore, a woman said from the hallway. I'd know you from the pictures if Sam had kept any that weren't blurry. Linda Carter came toward him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was small, with silver hair pinned back loosely and reading glasses hanging from a chain against her sweater. Her face was lined in the frank, unhidden way of someone who had spent a life squinting, laughing, worrying, and not paying much for creams that promised to undo any of it. Richard extended a hand. Linda looked at it, then took it warmly with both of hers. Richard, he said. Not Richie, not for several decades. Well, come in anyway. She did not sound impressed or unimpressed. She sounded busy. That unsettled him more than admiration would have. Sam took Richard's coat before Richard could decide where to put it. The front closet was full. Sam opened it, assessed the situation, and hung the coat over the back of a chair near the stairs. Professional system, he said. I can see that, Richard said. Linda called from the kitchen. If that's sarcasm, Richard, you can save it for after dinner. We ration it in this house. Sam pointed toward the kitchen. See? No standing around. The kitchen was smaller than Richard's pantry at home, and it held more life than his entire first floor. A pot steamed on the stove. A stack of plates waited beside the sink. Mail had been pushed into a pile near a fruit bowl with 3 bananas past their best days. A girl of maybe 9 sat at the table, coloring with half her body over the page. A teenage boy stood by the refrigerator, drinking from a glass and pretending not to listen to the adults. A woman in her 30s, Sam's daughter probably, moved around Linda with the practiced sidestep of someone who had done this in the same room for years. This is my daughter Rachel, Sam said. Her kids, Ellie and Ben. Tom's on his way if the world doesn't end at the auto shop first. Rachel smiled and offered her hand. Nice to meet you. Dad's been talking about you. That's unfortunate, Richard said. She laughed, not because it was especially funny, but because she had been raised in a house where guests were helped through the first awkward minute. The little girl looked up from her coloring. Are you Grandpa's friend from when he was bad? Ellie, Rachel said. Sam coughed into his fist. Linda turned from the stove with a look that suggested she had heard exactly that and chosen not to rescue anyone too quickly. Richard glanced at Sam at bad. Sam lifted both hands. That's an unfair summary. You stole apples, Ellie said. Once, Sam said. And a shopping cart. That was parts. Richard felt himself smiling, despite the tightness he had carried through the door. The wheel, actually. Ellie considered him with sudden respect. You helped? I was wrongly influenced. Sam laughed. There he is. The words were simple, but they landed strangely. There he is. As if some version of Richard had been missing and had stepped briefly into the room. Linda handed Sam a serving spoon. Make yourself useful before you get sentimental. Yes, ma'am. Sam moved without complaint. He opened a drawer, took out silverware, and passed it to Ben, who rolled his eyes but began setting the table. When the boy put a fork on the wrong side of a plate, Sam tapped the table lightly. Other side, Chief? I know. Then impress me. Ben switched it. Sam nodded as if the correction mattered, and did not matter at all. Richard stood near the doorway, unsure whether to help or stay out of the way. In his own house, hosting meant control. Food arrived hot because someone had been paid or instructed. People sat when he told them to sit. Wine was opened with the right tool. Plates matched. No one moved around him unless he had asked for something. Here, everyone moved. Rachel reached past Sam for a bowl. Linda told Ellie to clear her markers. Ben complained that he had just sat down. Sam told him he had not earned sitting yet. The television clicked off in the other room. Someone knocked into the trash can and apologized to it. It should have looked disorderly. It did, a little, but no one seemed afraid of the disorder. Richard, Linda said, can you carry that salad to the table? Unless you're one of those men who doesn't know what lettuce is. I know lettuce. Good, we're already ahead. She handed him the bowl without ceremony. Richard took it. The salad had been made in a scratched wooden bowl, the kind his wife would have thrown out years ago. He carried it to the dining table, which sat in a room that was not quite separate from the kitchen. The chairs did not match. One had a cushion tied on with blue ribbons. Another had a leg that had been repaired with a darker piece of wood. Richard placed the bowl in the center. Ben looked at him. You can sit anywhere except that one. That's Grandma's. I wasn't planning a takeover. Good, she'll fight you, Linda called from the kitchen. And win. Everyone sat in a loose order Richard could not decipher. Sam waited until Linda sat before he did, but not in a showy way. He pulled her chair back with one hand while still holding the serving fork in the other. She swatted lightly at his arm. I can sit down by myself. I've seen that rumor in print. Don't start. Sam kissed the top of her head as he passed behind her. Quick, casual, not for display. Richard looked away. Linda set the platter down harder than she meant to. Sam, I told you not to turn the oven down. I turned it down because the potatoes were burning. The potatoes were fine. They were smoking. They were dramatic. Rachel looked at Richard and said, this is their version of romance. It is not, Linda said. Sam reached for the serving fork. It is a little. Linda gave him a look, but when he tried to take the driest end of the roast, she moved it away from him and put a better slice on his plate. You're not eating shoe leather just to prove something, she said. Sam glanced at Richard. See what I live with? Linda sat down beside him. 42 years of surviving me, poor man. The table moved on. Nobody apologized. Nobody won. The irritation stayed small because the affection around it was older than the argument. Dinner began with passing, reaching, correcting, asking, refusing, accepting anyway. The roast was a little dry at one end. Linda said so before anyone else could, and Sam took the end piece she had failed to keep from him. Rachel asked Richard about the business he used to run. He answered politely, giving the clean version. Construction supply. Regional contracts. Sold at the right time. He was aware of Sam listening without looking like he was. Ben asked if Richard had ever driven a forklift. Richard said yes. This impressed Ben more than the sale of the company. Grandpa drove one into a loading dock, Ben said. I tapped it, Sam said. You dented it. The dock was already ugly. Linda pointed her fork at him. It was not already ugly. Richard watched them pass blame around like bread, easy and harmless. No one used the mistake to define the man who made it. No one stored it for later. Halfway through dinner, Rachel mentioned a bill from the orthodontist and lowered her voice when she said it. Linda heard anyway. We'll figure it out, Linda said. Mom, I wasn't asking. I know, I'm still allowed to hear. Sam looked at Rachel. Bring it by tomorrow. I'll look. Dad. I said look, not rob a bank. Rachel gave him a tired look. You always say look and then you do something. Then don't bring it. She sighed. I'll bring it. The exchange was practical, edged with worry. Money was not absent from the house. It sat there with them in the careful portions, the repaired chair, the lowered voices. Richard felt it and almost relaxed. This at least he understood. Shortfalls had numbers. Problems had solutions. Then Ellie held up her drawing. Grandpa, look. Sam turned immediately. Richard noticed that first. Not after finishing his sentence. Not after taking another bite. Immediately. Ellie had drawn a house with a purple roof, 3 round windows, and what appeared to be a dog larger than the front door. That dog's gonna eat the mailman, Sam said. It's not a dog, it's a horse. My mistake. That horse is going to eat the mailman. Ellie giggled. Do you like it? Sam took the page from her carefully, as if it were something that deserved both hands. I do, he said. You have to say that. No, I don't. I've seen your brother's art. Hey, Ben said. Sam studied the page a moment longer. I like the windows. They look like they're watching for somebody to come home. Ellie looked pleased, not because the praise was large, but because it had found something specific. Richard's fork stopped halfway to his plate. A drawing. A child waiting for someone to look. Sam handed the paper back, then glanced toward Ben. And your volcano last year was good too. Messy as sin, but good. Ben tried to shrug it off. It was okay. It was good, Sam said. You worked hard on it. Ben looked down at his plate, but his mouth moved like he was trying not to smile. No one paused for the moment. Linda asked for the potatoes. Rachel told Ellie not to put the drawing near the gravy. Sam reached for the bread. Life kept moving around the small praise, as if such things happened often enough here that no one had to make a ceremony of them. Richard sat very still. He saw Michael's papers on the kitchen table, the sharp pencil lines, the folded corner of one page under his own hand. He saw the way Michael had watched him pick up the drawing, not demanding, hoping. Richard had called it impractical. He had called it a picture. He had made the boy defend the one thing he had been brave enough to show. Linda touched his sleeve lightly. You all right, Richard? He looked at her hand, then at her face. Yes, he said. Fine. It was the answer he had used for years, and it did what it always did. It ended concern without answering it. Sam looked across the table. Not long, not obviously. Long enough. After dinner, Richard insisted on helping clear the plates. Linda allowed him 2 before taking the 3rd from his hands. You're a guest, she said. I can carry a plate. I'm sure you can. I'm not evaluating you for employment. Sam laughed from the sink. Richard stepped back, useless again. Rachel packed leftovers into containers. Ben disappeared and returned only when Linda called him back to take out trash. Ellie taped her drawing to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a tomato. The purple-roofed house hung crookedly between a school lunch calendar and a dentist appointment card. Sam stood beside Richard, drying a platter. She draws houses a lot, he said. Richard did not trust his voice at first. Does she? Castles mostly, houses when she's tired. Richard nodded. Sam put the platter away. Michael ever do that kind of thing? The question was quiet. It did not belong to the room so much as the space between the 2 men. Richard kept his eyes on the refrigerator. He drew buildings, he said. Sam waited. Richard could have stopped there. He should have. The evening had already given him enough discomfort to carry home. Instead, he heard himself add, good ones. The word scraped on the way out because it had come decades late and to the wrong person. Sam did not turn it into anything. He only nodded as if Richard had placed something breakable on the counter, and both of them had agreed not to touch it too quickly. Linda called Sam to find a missing lid. Rachel hugged her mother near the stove. Ben opened the back door and complained about the cold. Ellie asked if Richard was coming again sometime because Grandpa's bad stories were better with witnesses. Sam said, "Don't scare the man off." Richard took his coat from the chair near the stairs. Before putting it on, he looked once more at the refrigerator. The drawing was still crooked. No one fixed it. No one needed to. On the drive home, Richard kept both hands on the wheel and told himself Sam's porch needed work. The railing was loose. The siding on the north side would not last another winter without attention. The storm door should be replaced before it started taking the frame with it. By the time he reached the highway, he had already priced half of it in his head. It was easier that way. Materials, labor, time. Things a man could offer without having to say what he had seen. The wrong kind of help. Richard priced the porch before he let himself think about the girl's drawing. 2 new railings. Pressure-treated lumber would do, though cedar would look better and last longer. The storm door needed replacing, not repairing. The siding on the north wall had started to bow in a way that meant water had been getting behind it for some time. If Sam waited another winter, the job would double, maybe triple. By the time Richard reached Fox Chapel, he had built an entire list in his head. Materials, labor, timeline. Useful things. He parked in the garage and sat there with both hands still on the wheel. The overhead light clicked off after a minute, leaving only the faint glow from the dashboard. His house was just beyond the door. Clean, warm, quiet. Nothing lean, nothing needed patching. No child had taped a crooked drawing to the refrigerator. No one had called from another room asking where the good scissors were. Richard took the folded address from his coat pocket and laid it on the passenger seat. He should have thrown it away. Instead, he took out his phone. Sam answered on the 4th ring, slightly breathless. "Rich?" Richard disliked how quickly the nickname still found him. "Did I catch you at a bad time?" "No, trash night. I was wrestling a bag that did not want to go." Richard looked through the windshield at the closed garage door. "I wanted to talk to you about the house." There was a pause. "My house?" "Yes. If this is about the bathroom wallpaper, Linda picked it in 1998 and I've made my peace with it." Richard did not smile. "The porch rail is loose." "It's been loose." "That's not a defense. It wasn't meant to be." "And the storm door's pulling at the frame. You're going to have water damage if you don't deal with the siding before winter." Richard heard himself becoming brisk and felt steadier for it. "I know people. Good people. I can have someone come out this week and take a look." Another pause, smaller but more guarded. "Richmond," Sam said, "I didn't invite you over to inspect the property." "I know that." "Do you?" Richard opened the car door, then closed it again without getting out. "I'm offering help." "I hear you. It wouldn't be a big thing." "For you." The 2 words came without anger. That made them land harder. Richard shifted the phone to his other ear. "Don't make this into something." "I'm not. Because I'm not trying to embarrass you." "I didn't say you were. I saw things that need fixing, that's all." Sam exhaled softly. Richard could hear street noise on his end, a car passing, the plastic scrape of a trash bin wheel. "That's not all," Sam said. Richard went still. In the silence that followed, he saw Sam's kitchen again. Linda handing him the salad bowl as if he were simply another pair of hands. Ellie holding up the drawing. Sam saying he liked the windows. Ben hiding a smile over a compliment he had tried not to want. Richard pushed the images aside. "You have family there," he said. "Grandkids. A railing like that is a liability." "Now it's a liability?" "It is. You always did know how to make concern sound like a contract." Richard's mouth tightened. "That's unnecessary." "Maybe. I'm trying to do something decent." "I know." But Sam did not sound grateful enough. Richard hated himself for noticing. He got out of the car and walked into the house, with the phone still pressed to his ear. The kitchen lights came on automatically when he entered. The marble counter was clear except for a bowl of green apples no one but him would eat. He set his keys down harder than he meant to. "I can cover it," Richard said. "All of it, no strings." Sam was quiet. "No strings," Richard repeated. There are always strings when a man has to say that twice. That's clever. It's tired. Richard looked toward the dining room. 6 chairs around a polished table, all straight, all empty. "Do you want the help or not?" he asked. There it was, the turn. He heard it after it left his mouth. The offer becoming a test. Generosity becoming a demand for the right response. Sam heard it too. "No," Sam said. Richard did not move. "No? No. You're being proud." "Probably. That's foolish. Sometimes. You'd rather let the place fall apart?" "It's not falling apart. It needs work." "So do I. So do you." Richard let out a short, humorless laugh. "Now we're doing that." "No, I'm saying you came to dinner and saw my house." You didn't see a problem you could help with. You saw a problem you could stand above. The words were plain, no raised voice, no performance. Richard gripped the edge of the counter. That's not fair. No, Sam said, it probably isn't completely fair. Then why say it? Because it's close enough. Richard stared at the apples in the bowl. One had a small bruise near the stem. He turned it with 2 fingers until the bruise faced down. Sam continued, quieter now. If you want to come over for dinner again, come over. If you want to help me fix the rail one Saturday and let me hand you the wrong screws, fine, but don't send a crew to my house like you're cleaning up a mess you're too polite to name. Richard said nothing. The refrigerator hummed. The kitchen was so clean, it gave him nowhere to look. I wouldn't send just anybody, he said at last. I know that too. I was in that business for 40 years. I remember. I know what happens when people wait too long. I believe you. Then why are you arguing? Because there's a difference between showing up and paying somebody else to. Richard's hand loosened on the counter. Sam did not rush to fill the silence. That was becoming a habit Richard disliked and, worse, had begun to recognize as restraint. Linda and I have managed a long time, Sam said. Not perfectly, not pretty, but we've managed. You coming in with a check doesn't make me feel less tired, Rich. It makes me feel like you saw one evening of my life and decided you knew what it was missing. Richard looked toward the hallway, where the framed photograph of Michael at his college graduation hung near the stairs. Michael in a black gown, one hand holding the diploma case, his face angled away from Richard's arm around his shoulder. Richard had paid tuition, books, rent for the first year after graduation. Later, the down payment, every advantage. That was what he had told Sam. The photograph had always looked like proof. Now it looked like a receipt. I didn't mean it that way, Richard said. I know. You keep saying that. Because I do know. Sam's voice softened, but it did not let him off. You don't mean half the things the way they land. Richard closed his eyes for a second. In the dark, behind his lids, Michael was 17 again, one hand on a drawing, saying, I'm trying to tell you what I want. Richard had heard defiance. He had answered with force. Later, with money. Good schools, a car, tuition. Help when help made Richard feel less like the man who had torn the page. He opened his eyes. The apple still faced bruised down. What am I supposed to do then? He asked. The question came out harsher than he meant, but underneath it was something he had not intended to give Sam. Sam heard it. Richard could tell by the way his answer took longer. I don't know, Sam said. Maybe start with not fixing the thing that lets you avoid the thing. Richard gave a tired laugh. That's supposed to make sense? Not tonight, maybe. You always talk like this now? No, mostly I talk about trash bags and Linda's blood pressure pills. Richard almost smiled, but it did not hold. Sam shifted the phone. Your son still around here? Richard's throat tightened. Yes. You got his number? Of course I have his number. Then maybe don't call a contractor first. Richard looked again at Michael's graduation photograph. I don't know what I'd say. Sam's answer was immediate and ordinary. Then don't start with much. That's not helpful. It might be the only helpful thing I've got. Richard stood alone in his lit kitchen, wearing the same good shoes he had worn to Sam's house, his coat still on though the room was warm. He had called to offer repairs. He had ended up with Michael's name between them again, quiet and unavoidable. I should let you go, Richard said. Yeah, trash bag's probably winning by now. Richard swallowed. Sam. Yeah? I wasn't trying to buy anything. I know. This time Richard heard the difference. Sam believed him. He also did not accept the offer. That was harder. They ended the call without ceremony. For several minutes, Richard remained where he was. Then he took off his coat and hung it on the back of a kitchen chair instead of carrying it to the closet. It looked wrong there, careless, like someone had come in expecting to leave again. He walked to the hallway. Michael's graduation photograph had a thin line of dust along the top edge of the frame. Richard wiped it with his thumb. In the picture, Michael's smile was polite, almost professional. Richard had always thought the boy looked tired that day, because commencement ceremonies were long and hot. Now he wondered if Michael had simply learned early how to stand beside him without leaning in. Richard took his phone from his pocket. Michael's contact was easy to find, too easy. His name sat there among numbers Richard used more often. Dentist, accountant, pharmacy, the agency. He opened the message thread. The last exchange was 3 weeks old. Hope work's going well? Thanks, busy but good. Hope you're doing okay? Fine. 3 clean lines, nothing wrong with them. Nothing alive either. Richard placed his thumb over the call button. He did not press it. Not yet. Instead, he stood in the hallway with the phone in his hand, the photograph on the wall, and no check large enough to make the next thing easier. The dinner he couldn't pay for. Richard called Michael 3 times before he let the phone ring. The first time, he He opened the contact and closed it before his thumb touched the button. The second time, he pressed call, then ended it before the first ring could reach the other end. The third time, he put the phone face down on the kitchen counter and walked to the sink as if he had gone there for a glass of water. He did not drink any. The house was quiet around him, too clean for the kind of thing he was trying to do. No television running in another room. No drawer closing. No one asking where the blue cup was. The dining room table had been polished 2 days earlier, and the 6 chairs sat in their proper places, equal distance apart, as if waiting for a meeting that had never been scheduled. Richard picked up the phone again. Michael's name filled the screen. He had thought about texting first. A text could be edited. A text could be made reasonable. He could write something plain and careful, something that did not put Michael on the spot. Can we talk sometime this week? No, too vague. I'd like to see you if you're available. Too much like an appointment. There's something I need to say. Too dramatic. Michael would hate that. Richard stood in his kitchen with his coat still on, though he had no place to go yet, and understood with a practical clarity that there was no correct wording that would make this safe. So he called. Michael answered on the 5th ring. Dad? The word was guarded before it was anything else. Michael, Richard said. Everything okay? There it was. The shape of their relationship in 3 words. A call from Richard meant something needed fixing, signing, moving, deciding, or explaining. Yes, Richard said, then heard how useless that was. Nothing's wrong. A pause. Okay, I'm not calling about anything practical. Another pause, longer. Richard looked at the dining room chairs. I wanted to ask if you would meet me for dinner. I'm pretty busy this week. I know. I've got a project closing. I know you're busy. Michael did not answer. Richard felt the old sentence rising in him. Everyone is busy. He could hear how he would say it. Dry enough to be harmless, sharp enough to make a point. He held it behind his teeth until it passed. It doesn't have to be dinner, he said. Coffee, 10 minutes. Whatever works for you. What's this about? Richard closed his eyes briefly. I owe you an apology. The line went so quiet that Richard checked the screen to make sure the call had not dropped. When Michael spoke again, his voice was lower. For what? Richard looked toward the hallway, where the graduation photograph hung. He had rehearsed a dozen answers and trusted none of them. For something I should say in person, he said. Michael let out a small breath, not quite a laugh. That sounds serious. It is. Are you sick? No. Did something happen? Yes, Richard said, but not like that. Michael waited. Richard almost filled the silence. He nearly said Sam's name, nearly explained the dinner service, nearly brought in the porch and the drawing and all the pieces that might make Michael understand why his father had suddenly found language after decades of not using it. He did not. I'm asking, Richard said, not demanding. The sentence felt awkward. It was not the kind of thing he knew how to say. It sat on the line with its seams showing. Michael heard the seams. Saturday morning, he said at last. There's a coffee place near my office. I can do half an hour. Half an hour. Richard took it carefully, the way a man might accept a glass filled too close to the rim. Thank you, he said. Michael did not answer right away. Saturday, he said, and ended the call. Richard stood with the phone still against his ear after the line went dead. Then he put it down on the counter, slowly, as if any quick movement might undo what had just happened. On Saturday, Richard arrived 28 minutes early. The coffee shop sat on the corner of a renovated brick building in the Strip District, with black-framed windows and a chalkboard menu written by someone who thought handwriting could be a personality. Richard ordered black coffee and took a table near the back where he could see the door without seeming to watch it. He had chosen a suit, then changed into a sweater and sport coat. The suit had looked like business. The sweater looked like he had tried not to look like business, which was its own kind of failure. He kept his coat on for the first 10 minutes, then took it off, then wished he had left it on. 58, Michael walked in. Richard knew his son's walk before he fully saw his face. Efficient, shoulders slightly forward, phone in hand but not being used. Michael wore a dark jacket over a blue button-down, no tie. His hair had started to gray at the temples. That surprised Richard, though it should not have. Michael looked around, found him, and came over. Hi, he said. Richard stood too quickly, and hi. They shook hands. It was absurd, father and son shaking hands in a coffee shop. Michael sat across from him and kept his jacket on. Do you want coffee? Richard asked. I got one on the way. Of course he had. Michael had never liked arriving unprepared. Richard sat back down. His own coffee had gone cold at the edges. For a moment they did the old thing. Weather without weather, work without detail, traffic, construction on Penn Avenue, Michael's project closing. Richard heard himself asking competent questions and Michael answering them competently. Anyone nearby would have thought they were fine. That was the trouble with fine. Michael checked his watch once, not rudely, but Richard saw it. I know you have time limits, Richard said. Michael looked up. I didn't mean… No, I know. Richard placed both hands flat on the table. His left thumb pressed into the knuckle of his right hand. I asked you here for a reason. Michael's face changed almost imperceptibly. The politeness stayed, but something behind it braced. Richard had seen men brace in negotiations. Contractors expecting bad news. Bankers expecting a number. Employees expecting blame. He had not wanted his son to look that way across from him. I've been thinking, Richard said. Michael's mouth moved slightly, almost a smile, almost not. Okay. The old Richard reached for the opening. I know I wasn't an easy father, he began. I had a lot on my shoulders back then. The company was growing. Your mother was, He stopped. Michael watched him. There it was. The road he knew. Explanation first, context first. A careful laying out of pressures until responsibility became something shared by the room, the economy, the times, the size of the bills, the fear of failure, anything except the man who had made the boy flinch. Richard took his hands off the table and put them in his lap. No, he said. Michael's brow tightened. No? That's not what I asked you here to hear. A woman at the counter laughed at something the barista said. The espresso machine hissed. Someone opened the door, letting in a brief draft that moved the paper napkins near the sugar station. Richard looked at the table instead of at Michael. I've been trying to say this right, he said. That's already part of the problem, I guess. Michael did not help him. Richard rubbed his thumb against the side of his cup. When you were 17, he said, you showed me those drawings. The community center. The one by the library. Michael's face closed, not all at once, but enough. I remember, he said. I know, Richard swallowed. No, I know you remember. I'm saying I remember too. Not the way I used to tell it. Not the cleaned up version. Michael stayed still. I tore them, Richard said. Your drawings. I tore them because I was angry, and because I was scared, and because I thought if I made it sound stupid, then you'd stop wanting it. His voice caught on the last few words. He cleared his throat, annoyed by it, then stopped being annoyed because even that felt like hiding. And I hit you. Michael's jaw shifted. Richard nodded once, as if he had to agree with the ugliness of the sentence before he could keep going. I hit you, and then I made it about you touching my wrist. Like that was the thing. Like you were the one who had crossed a line. Michael looked down. That was wrong, Richard said. He stopped. I don't have a better word. It was wrong. He tried to look at Michael and only managed it for a second. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry I made you feel small. I'm sorry I made what you loved feel foolish. I'm sorry I called it discipline when it was me losing control. Michael did not speak. Richard breathed in unevenly. And I'm sorry I kept paying for things afterward like that proved I had loved you right. The sentence came out quieter than the others. Michael turned the coffee cup slowly with one hand. He had not taken a sip. You never asked why I stopped drawing, he said. Richard looked at him. I told myself you grew out of it. I know you did. The sentence was not cruel, it was tired. Richard sat with it. Michael's fingers stayed around the cup. I didn't stop right away. Richard stayed quiet. I drew for a while, at school mostly, then less. Michael's mouth tightened. It got complicated to want it. Richard felt something in his chest pull tight. He had known Michael was good at his work. He had praised it to Sam. He had never asked whether it had been a compromise. I didn't know that, Richard said. You didn't ask. No, Michael repeated. The word did not accuse loudly. It did not need to. Richard nodded. You're right. Michael looked at him for a long moment, as if testing whether there was an argument hidden under the agreement. There was not. Not one Richard would allow out. I'm not sure what you want me to say, Michael said. I don't want you to say anything for me. Michael's expression shifted a little. Suspicion, maybe, or simple surprise. Richard placed his palms on the table again, this time not to steady an argument, but to keep from reaching across it. I asked you here because I needed to say it to you. You don't have to make me feel better about it. You don't have to tell me it's fine. It wasn't fine. I know. And it wasn't just that night. Richard closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. I know that too. Michael's shoulders lowered a fraction, not in relief exactly. More like he had set down something heavy only to keep one hand on it. The coffee shop moved around them. Cups clinked. The door opened and closed. Someone's laptop chimed. Richard had once believed important things needed proper rooms, closed doors, polished tables, the right time allotted. Here, at a small table with cold coffee and a wobbling metal leg, his son looked more real to him than he had in years. Michael checked his watch again. This time, Richard did not resent it. I know you have to go, he said. Yeah, Michael did not stand. Soon. Richard nodded. There were things he wanted. Too many. He wanted to ask if Michael still had any drawings. He wanted to ask if he had ever told his wife. He wanted to ask whether there was any version of their life where Sunday dinners became possible, where a chair in Richard's house did not stay empty because he had made it safer for his son to remain elsewhere. He asked none of that. "Thank you for coming," he said. Michael's eyes moved to his. Richard made himself finish it. "And thank you for listening. I know you didn't owe me that." Michael looked down at his coffee. "No," he said, "I didn't." The answer hurt. It also felt clean. Michael stood then, and Richard stood with him, slower this time. For a second, they faced each other in the narrow space between tables. Richard did not offer his hand. He did not know what to offer, and for once he did not force the wrong thing into the space. Michael put on his jacket. "I can't do dinner," he said. Richard nodded, "Well, all right. But maybe coffee again." Michael zipped his jacket halfway. "Not next week, after the project closes." Richard felt the answer move through him and did not grab at it. "When?" he asked. The question came out too quickly. Michael noticed. Richard almost corrected himself, almost said no pressure, almost tried to make the moment easier. Michael put one hand on the back of the chair. "I'll call you," he said. Richard knew what that meant. It could mean next month. It could mean never. It could mean Michael needed the right to decide without being chased. So Richard nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll wait." Michael looked at him for a second longer, as if testing whether Richard understood the cost of that sentence. Then he left. Through the window, Richard saw him cross to the curb and unlock his car. Michael opened the driver's door but did not get in right away. He stood with one hand on the roof, looking down at the seat as if he had forgotten what he came out there to do. Then he got in. A minute passed before the car started. Richard could not see his face clearly through the glass, but he saw Michael take out his phone, look at it, and put it back without calling anyone. Only then did he pull away. Richard remained standing until he realized the woman at the next table was trying to get past him. He stepped aside, apologized, and sat down. His coffee had gone cold. He drank it anyway. That evening, Richard returned to his house before dark. He hung his coat in the closet, then took it back out and draped it over one of the dining room chairs. Not carefully, not as a statement. He simply did not feel like putting everything away. In the kitchen, he opened his laptop and saw the reminder from the dinner companion service for the following week. Confirm Friday reservation? Richard rested his fingers on the trackpad. For 8 months, he had answered yes before thinking. A table for 2. A name he did not know. A conversation that ended when the bill was paid. He had mistaken that for control and, sometimes on the worst nights, for company. He clicked cancel. The screen asked if he was sure. He was not sure of much. Not of Michael. Not of coffee after the project closed. Not of whether one apology could survive the years it had taken to say, but he clicked yes. Later, he stood in the dining room with the lights off. The table was barely visible in the gray coming through the windows. 6 chairs, 5 empty in the ordinary way. One pulled out slightly because his coat still hung over the back. His phone lay on the table, face up. It did not ring. Richard looked at it once, then looked away. He left the chair as it was, not to fill the place, not to pretend someone was coming, just to stop making emptiness look neat.